Test, test. I had to test it first. Hi, everybody. Are we ready to begin? Can I interrupt your little cocktail going on and we go back to it a little bit later? All right. I almost feel like the school teacher trying to gather the students for class, but it's not a bad feeling. All right. First of all, welcome and thank you for joining us for our very first event in Poland. My name is Amalia and I am from the Recursive. Before we start, I would like to thank very much Google, our hosts for today, and tell you a couple of words about the Recursive. I strongly hope you know who we are. But if you don't, we are a regional online media from entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We are exclusively focused on the regional tech and innovation ecosystems. And besides covering the news and everything exciting going on in our ecosystems, we are also storytellers, bridge builders, and connectors. So, as I mentioned, this is our very first event here, hopefully, one of many to come. And today, we will talk about AI innovation. First, I will pass the baton to my colleague Elena, who will tell you about a report we launched last year, the State of Innovation in CEE. And then we'll have a panel moderated by our co founder, Irina. And after that, as I mentioned, we can continue with our little cocktail. So without further ado, I present you Elena.
Thank you. Thank you, dearest Amalia. Well, as you know, my name is Elena Vrabie, and I'm the head of sales and also country lead in Romania. And I will be your host today to present the Recursive C's AI report from last year. This was, this kept us awake for the better part of 2023. And dare I say, is going to keep us awake this year as well. My colleague will, at the end, will wrap it up with what we're doing this year. So let the games begin. Let the presentation begin. We will talk about what brought us to tap into this market. We will talk about the methodology of our report, the why. We will share key insights for those of you who haven't accessed the report. Has anybody read the report already? Perfect. Perfect, the perfect audience. So this is new insights. And we'll wrap it up. About the team, my colleague already mentioned, we are a regional team with 13 members and counting. We cover the local innovative ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe with a focus on Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Serbia, Croatia, North Macedonia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Poland, of course. We are storytellers and connectors. We are always looking for innovative projects, and we want to shine a light on everything amazing that's happening here in this community, in the tech community. Okay, so our big, hairy, audacious goal. Why did we choose to focus on the AI innovation ecosystem? Beyond the hype that came with the advancement of large language models, in the last 3 years, telling stories from our corner of the world, we have reported on many noteworthy AI-first companies stemming from our region. Curious, how many of you are founders? Tech startup founders. Okay. Investors here? Wink, wink. Nice to see you as well. The rest, do you work for startups? You're a professional in the startup ecosystem. Okay, so we get to know each other better. You know something about me, I know something about you. We were in the past years, we've seen the maximum potential of AI to transform our businesses, our economies, and our daily lives. So we decided it was worth to show the world the big picture. With this AI report, we had in Central and Eastern Europe, we had 4 key objectives: to provide the first mapping of key players in the AI innovation ecosystem, to highlight strengths, opportunities, and even challenges, to learn and improve from one ecosystem to the other. It's a competitive global map. To point to potential threats that the region might be facing soon, and to identify AI trends, specializations, and industries to keep an eye on going forward. Now, about a short view about the methodology. The research team used a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods based on sources such as the Recursive database, the Recursive AI survey, qualitative interviews with various stakeholders, over 40 of them, the Recursive website, even third-party technology reports. We started by identifying key players in the AI innovation ecosystem. And by key players, we identified 2 types of product companies that build AI technologies and that include AI features relevant to the value proposition. A few numbers: we identified around 900 product companies from 12 countries that employ around 18 types of AI specialization and operating in 32 industries. We also identified 125 investors relevant for AI companies in our region, including regional and international investors. We analyzed public data, and again, we went with the survey for the in-depth interviews to understand the challenges key players face in developing, investing in, or supporting AI and commercial solutions. Now, during our research, we tapped into some of the brightest minds in the industry and academia from the region about how they contribute to AI development. A few examples. A project by the Gate Research Institute uses AI to early diagnose Alzheimer's in Bulgaria and the world. Meanwhile, a Bulgarian startup named Kelvin Health is using thermography AI to provide easy diagnosis in every context. Investors believe that AI will influence all sectors of the economy, and many of them are keeping a close eye on healthcare. Do you see a pattern here? Do you know which is the market, the vertical that is going to see the most traction? Can I hear it? Exactly. Yes. This is the key, actually, through which we're going to open a series of insights that I will talk about soon. So, healthcare indeed emerged as key area of application for most AI product companies in Central and Eastern Europe. We mapped around over 30 industries that AI product companies in Central and Eastern Europe service, but healthcare and life sciences had the largest share, with 17% or over 150 companies. Investors also placed their bets on the sector. When excluding outliers, which are around over $100 million, healthcare is the highest funded industry. What applications are we talking about? We already mentioned tools that improve diagnosis previously and therapy, but there are also some solutions that speed up medical data and process management, that support patient care, and advanced biomedical research and drug development. We have featured in our report some examples from Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, the Czech Republic, and Croatia. Now, the second insight. Central and Eastern Europe is becoming a hotbed for AI innovation. Nobody can contest this. A startup boom is particularly evident from our data in the period between 2015 and 2023. Then, over 600 AI product companies sprang to life. Of course, the pandemic did not slow down this momentum. Nearly a quarter of these companies were funded between 2020 and 2023. And with startups booming, capital also followed. We tracked in our analysis that between 2018 and 2021, funding the AI startups in CE skyrocketed to at least over $40 billion, compared to 18 million between 2014 and 2018. The momentum grew, and it's still growing. And this follows a general trend which shows funding in CE improving in recent years and growing versus the Western Europe decreasing. With AI showing a big potential, we expect to see the gap closing even further and faster when it comes to AI solutions. Moving forward to the third insight. Despite the funding situation improving in Europe and CEE, the AI innovation ecosystem is still in its early development stages. The funding is going mostly to pre-seed and seed companies, with a few outliers. Meanwhile, a large percentage of companies have not raised their first funding round. But what's important with the outliers is the fact that they show that when companies do reach a certain maturity, a certain product market fit, they do find money in the market and the support they need, both from regional and international investors. But we have seen, and we keep seeing, a deficiency of regional investors specialized in AI technology and deep tech in general, as well as investors targeting post-Series A rounds. Our survey found that some founders still struggle with raising, which makes sense because the sector is emerging, and they are more prudent in trying to distinguish companies with real value added and a solid AI proposition. But on the market, we have noticed a mix of alternative sources of investors from VC and private equity to angel investor networks, startup accelerators, and governmental funds that are available for AI companies. Moving forward to the fourth insight. Another key challenge of the region is nurturing and retention of AI talent. We have spoken to numerous founders and investors who praise and continue to praise the quality of the IT talent in the region. And even now in Poland, we hear this more and more. Yet when it comes to AI talent, the picture is a bit different. Our survey from last year indicates AI product companies have a high difficulty in finding and hiring and retaining AI talent. Some of the most sought after positions include data scientists, machine learning engineers, DevOps, to name a few. The interviews we conducted, over 40, helped us dig a little bit more into the reasons behind this scarcity of AI talent, and thus also uncover some maybe recommendations of what we can all do in our countries. Although the region has a rich reservoir of tech talent, many choose to leave after high school or university in search of further study or better job prospects. Here lies, of course, opportunities for governments to incentivize talent. For those who do want to study AI in the country, there haven't been many opportunities yet. Do you agree? How do you feel it? Are there more opportunities coming for those who have studied? Do you feel it? Again, this here lies an opportunity for us to focus more on offering more specialized degrees. We have noticed collaborations between academia and industry, but uh, students need real life experiences. Sorry? Now, the fifth insight brings us to another challenge. Tech transfer remains a significant obstacle both for talent and innovation development in the region. 15 years ago, AI mainly existed within the research and academic community. We have come a long way to understanding and employing the benefits of AI in a commercial context. But today we have both research and commercial opportunities. We still miss the link between the two, as pointed out again and again by the experts we interviewed. Based on their recommendations, we identified 4 opportunities to address this issue: creating comprehensive frameworks for collaboration, developing AI research focused institutions across all countries, and we have actually seen models in Bulgaria, Greece, and Serbia. Improve AI research collaboration at the regional level by establishing connections between key institutions and share knowledge. And ensure there are data management infrastructures in place that can connect research data with the needs of the industry. Moving forward to the last 2 key insights. Before, we showed you that healthcare is standing out as an industry of choice for many startup founders. But we also looked at the AI specializations that are particularly promising. Natural language processing, the technology that powers everything from chatbots to virtual assistants and translation apps, accounts for the 4th largest area of specialization among regional AI startups. Computer vision is another key area of promise, with numerous applications ranging from facial recognition to medical imaging, autonomous driving, and augmented reality. More than half of investors mentioned that they're looking for computer vision as an area in which they will be scouting companies. Investors, do you agree? No. To the last and seventh key insight. The emerging and smaller ecosystems in the region have the ability and the adaptability to change that larger markets have lost, but all would be in vain in the absence of strong AI governments. Currently, governments have a lot to face. There's the challenge presented by AI risks, from threats to displacing the workforce to inherited biases in algorithms. At the same time, there will be ethical trade offs between competing values like accuracy, fairness, and explainability. There are also concerns among industry players that regulation, such as what the EU is proposing with the AI Act, could stifle innovation and place regional companies at a disadvantage relative to their counterparts in less regulated regions. Do you feel the same, AI builders? There. Okay. So, for the for a strong AI government, we have identified 3 key pillars. First, there is no question that the regulation of AI will need to be a balancing act between ethics, mitigating risks, and avoiding hurdles to innovation. We have heard about the term a sandbox. Second, there is clearly a big economic opportunity in AI, which governments can encourage through different types of investments, data management infrastructures, and helping create a robust pipeline of talent. And finally, governments have the chance to be a unifying force among stakeholders at the regional level, facilitating dialogue and knowledge exchange for harmonizing efforts across all the sectors and all the region. Of course, we have mapped a supporting infrastructure, and these are like players in 3 categories: research institutions, startup programs, and community platforms and event organizers. Do you feel supported building in AI right now? Is there something missing? These are questions that definitely we can touch upon the networking. So, these organizations and the connections and transfer of knowledge they make possible are particularly important in the region. And again, we are growing together because the current picture painted by AI product companies shows room for improvement in how academia, research, and industry cooperate. To sum it all up, if you were to take some ideas from the report summarized, keep up the speed in health tech to fortify the region's economies and societies. Keep up the momentum and funding for AI startups to help grow. We need to level the playing field for AI startups post Series A. Then show the region tech talent the opportunities to develop here. Work to fix the missing bond between science and industry. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and they're appearing maybe too late on the market. The ball is in the court, of course, again to the governments to define thoughtful regulations without suffocating the regional AI ecosystem and step up as key supporters, investors, or early stage adopters of AI. And that's a wrap for me. Thank you all for your attention. I want to take this opportunity again to thank our partner Google for letting us host this event here, as well as OTB Ventures for supporting our endeavor last year. Whoop, whoop. Uh, feel free to scan the code on the slide to get access to the full report. And now I would like to give the floor to our esteemed speakers presented by my colleague, the Recursive co-founder and CEO, Irina Obushtarova. Please give her a warm applause.
I think it is. Okay, it's all working. You're a wonderful audience. Thank you for showing up, actually. And like many others who have registered, I'm going to try to make it interesting for you. And I think the speakers that we have invited today are going to share something that would give you a bit more personal experience on what is it to work in this field, where are the opportunities in the future, and how can we make the most of it when it comes to Central and Eastern Europe. I would like to invite here with me on stage Karol Szubstarski, seasoned partner at OTB Ventures, one of the premier European VC firms specializing in DeepTech. Investments like SpaceTech, AI and automation, FinTech, Cybersecurity. Karol himself has been playing a very active role in the development of OTB since the very beginning. I think in 2017, they have closed recently also their, I'm not sure. Are we allowed to say no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
170 million euros fund.
Which is quite a success. So there will be more and more funding for deep tech companies in Europe.
Absolutely.
Yes. there is optimism, and I'm pretty sure that Central and Eastern Europe is gonna be also one of the regions that we're gonna see a lot of AI innovation happening in the future. I would like to invite also Chris Vrobo, founder and CEO of Verb AI, who are pioneering in virtual being creation suit. We're going to talk a bit more about virtual beings. To be honest, I also heard about virtual beings only today, and I got the chance to learn about them from him. Verb transforms conversational AI. You know, we saw one of the trends, actually is one of the hottest trends that we see in our region, into lifelike avatars, enhancing customer experience across websites, mobile apps, physical locations, and much more. We were speaking about mobile apps with a lady in the audience. We were speaking about schools and education. So these are all fields where conversational AI can actually bring value. And Chris is also a passionate advocate for innovation and interim consultant and product manager, guiding companies in adopting emerging technologies like VR, augmented reality, and also machine learning. He is also someone who is very passionate about metaverse. So we have here someone who is at the cross section between the different industries.
Tried everything.
Yeah. Now, because I dropped this term, and I think we should actually start with that. What are virtual beings? What are they good for? How do they look like? Do they have rights in the new AI Act? Are they going to have rights on their own? Should we be afraid of them, or are they like, I don't know, friends to us?
Well, so virtual beings is a piece of technology. So essentially, you know, this is like a conversational avatar that can interact with humans. That's a really important aspect. So it works in real time. You can speak to it, and it will speak back to you. When it comes to rights, I believe not yet, not anything that is yet said. But I do remember one of the Sophie robot. I don't know if anyone knows that. I think it became a citizen of Saudi Arabia at some point. So I can imagine some very powerful and popular virtual beings maybe becoming a citizens of certain countries. I don't know.
Estonia for sure.
Yeah, might happen. So essentially this is a technology. So it's just more about like how we will use it as people. So it's like, you know, technology by itself is not wrong. It's just a matter of how we use it. So if there are any risk of using this technology, then it will definitely come from us.
And why did you decide to jump in this field? Why? Because I think when you have experiences and competences in so many fields, you have also a wide choice of whatever you want to do in the startup field. So why conversational AI? Why virtual beings?
It's not specifically that, you know, the virtual being by itself, I would say, is a interface. So it's definitely technology that is needed to create an interface. And it actually started from eventually, you know, my experience as product manager, working with different technologies. You already heard about VR, AR, and so on. So it's like once you become a product manager, you start thinking in terms of like how to build better products, how to make it more efficient from the perspective of users, and so on. So essentially, it was this kind of like aha moment where I thought, okay, chatbots already exist. People are very skeptical, and rightfully, like a couple of years ago, they weren't that great as ChatGPT today. And it's just okay. So at some point, people will definitely, the technology will, you know, develop enough so it will be actually useful to incorporate in kind of like experiences. And chat by itself, so text form, is not the most natural form of communication. For us humans, the most natural way of communicating is basically through our voice. That's what we do since birth, and basically the most natural way we can interact with also computers in a way.
Yeah, especially because I think more than 80%, more than 90% of the communication is actually non-verbal. So it goes much more beyond the words themselves.
Exactly.
Okay. Because I'm not sure that everyone has a background in this innovation industry, Karol, I wanted maybe to tap a bit more on the topic of deep tech. Like, what is actually deep tech? Why deep tech requires like a different type of funding, and how is AI now changing your investment thesis? How does it make it so exciting? Yeah. Are you excited about the future of AI, especially in our region? So there are too many questions at once, but I think they're related.
Quite a few, but
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah.
I guess I can share what deep tech is for us. Deep tech is a very broad definition, and I guess every single person or kind of VC fund can define it a bit differently. For us, deep tech or real tech is basically those are the companies that have some unique technological angle. So they have fundamental technological advantage over other players in the market that provide tangible value add for its customers, stand out across their respective peers in a competitive landscape, and are able to scale globally. So that's our kind of or my working definition of a deep tech, and that's how we look at the space. We're looking for those companies that have built some fundamental advantage, some level of defensibility within technological sector, but not building technology for the sake of technology, but building the technology that can make a difference. So that's how we approach it. Obviously, it's a very broad definition. So many companies can fit into this definition, spanning from space technologies through enterprise automation software, FinTech infrastructure, cybersecurity, IoT, robotics, and those are exactly the sectors that we are after. Obviously, different AI applications are fitting into this picture as well. If we are excited about the opportunity related to AI, obviously we are. We can see the prevalent impact of AI into multiple sectors, and AI obviously is a category on itself, right? So so we are super excited what it can bring to the table and how it can transform different markets, spanning from medicine through transportation, logistics, you name it. Basically, it can change on every single avenue of a global economy if used properly.
I would like to ask both of you, because I also received this question just recently when I was on a panel, and I think it is worthwhile. Why are investors and founders so excited about AI? Why? Because at this point, we are somewhere between a hype and an upcoming trend. Funding in AI still continues to be relatively high. Despite global recession, despite everything, if you have like a defensible, interesting technology that always comes with the big promise of huge impact, that's also the other thing. AI comes at us since the ChatGPT event with the promise that it's going to transform not just an industry, but like the whole economy. Some of us are still skeptical about it, but in this context, why are founders and investors so hyped about AI right now?
Sure. Maybe
Yeah.
very
Maybe
briefly
please go.
Very briefly from my side. So I've been around for in a VC industry for the past 11 years, I guess, or more. So kind of I've seen quite a few of hypes, to be very frank, and it was like metaverse hype, AR, VR hype, drone hype, blockchain hype, and right now AI hype. So kind of the advantage of AI in that very case is that is kind of it is distilling itself to many sectors, so it can be applicable into multiple verticals. So kind of obviously blockchain technology was promised as a Web 3.0 platform, basically that was supposed to kind of transform the whole way how we kind of consume data and how we kind of store data. But eventually, from my perspective, it's a sophisticated database and a new way to store information with the timestamps, right? And it has applications in multiple sectors, but still it hasn't found its killer use case. While AI, with the emergence of large language models, kind of has shown the new way of introducing artificial intelligence into multiple sectors, right? So that's why it is so much hype out there. Obviously, there is a lot of buzz in it, so you need to find the gold nugget. It's not that easy, to be very frank, but I guess it's a different story.
Yeah, so I agree that in a way, like AI in general, where was the hype, as you mentioned, it was already there, kind of recessed a bit. Now it's hot again, but I would say it's hot again in a form of LLMs. So any investors eventually, when they are looking at startups, AI is not enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, but AI is just not enough. And obviously, it's a matter of whether the startup uses ChatGPT underneath or something, whether they have actually a deep tech or they are just gluing pieces together, right? And I would say that's why the investors might be a bit skeptical. And I would say, like, in general, the investments slowed down, especially in Europe, in terms of like AI. Investors are more cautious. And
if you take a look on the first wave of investment in past months, in new AI wave of investments, indeed, the vast majority of the investment went to a couple of players, right? So for fundamental models, LLMs, and so there was obviously a lot of hype around because everyone wanted to place a bet, and not everyone could afford to invest in Mistral, for example. But the ballpark of the investment went into those fundamental models that required really heavy capital injections, and those money in 80%, I guess, landed at the bank account of NVIDIA, right? So really, that's quite a sad truth, is that basically VC money are basically pumping the NVIDIA market stock for the past 2 years. So I guess that indeed the big promise of LLMs emerged or put on the pedestal once again AI as a category, but most of the excitement was around LLM and LLM applications, right?
And I can add the other perspective why
Please
founders
go.
are
Yeah, the
actually
founders,
excited.
yeah.
Because we are excited with Verb in general, what's going on, and especially the LLMs and the democratization of that. So now it's actually super easy to jump into the game because of most of this is like an open source. And to me, the whole large language models, like coming back to those hypes that happened, it's like another, not necessarily a trend, I would say it's like a technological revolution in a way. Because, for instance, blockchain, as properly mentioned, is like a database. We already had databases, and now it's just a matter of, do we need another one which is distributed in a way? With large language models, I wouldn't say we had anything close to this yet. So anything that can actually process information and produce outputs automatically in a human reasonable way, right? On a human level, more or less. So I would say this is one of the biggest revolution that happened, like similar to the whole internet revolution. And we had those, right? Like a mobile revolution. I would say it's much closer to, let's say, mobile moment, where actually now anyone can start working on LLMs, try to learn them, try to think of a way how we can apply them to existing products and processes. So that's why I would say it would be super exciting times for startups again, but especially those who are really not only just building startups, but really building, let's say, sustainable businesses and products. And it's a different mindset. So you would rather prioritize someone with a lot of like vertical experience over a dropout, a high school, like a study dropout, right? University dropout. Because those people, they not necessarily have skills that can build a sustainable innovation.
I beg to differ here, but I'm also not sure what you mean by sustainable businesses and that they're necessarily different than startups. I think startups can also have sustainable business models and businesses over time. And here I'm going to give you an example. So when they asked me this question, I was thinking about the times when we had the Web 2.0 boom and how this boom, and also before that, like the internet boom, it changed like the whole structure. The leaders weren't clear, and the most valuable companies, the whole rankings, they completely swapped. And I think now we're approaching a period like this where we still don't know who are going to be the most valuable companies in the next 10 years, and they might not be the current ones. They are challenged. Now, what we hear here is that the leaders are most probably going to be the ones who have the access to the compute power. So they need the capital. So that this might not be the little startups, because it's going to be hard for them to compete with the incumbents, right?
In AI, I guess right now there are two things that matter: the compute power and proprietary data access. And those are the domains of a big companies, as you mentioned. So I wouldn't say that LLM revolution at least favors the startups, right? Because it's really hard to go against Amazons of this world, Microsofts of this world, Googles. They have proprietary access to data. They have resources to buy data. For example, Reddit, I guess, kind of sold 200 million worth data just in 2023. So kind of and they can buy as many H100s as they would like to, or well, as much as it is available, maybe, because kind of that's a very strict resource right now.
So we're pretty much now in the phase where we're building the infrastructure, but then we're going to also have the next phase, the leaders of those who are going to develop like the new business models, who are going to have the customer facing role, or I don't know, the ones that are actually, you know, the face of whatever technology that is or business that is to the world. Yeah. And the leaders, they're also not clear. I mean, we do remember Uber popping up in this kind of like mess that was the Web 2.0 and then the Airbnbs and so on and so forth. So I think right now, investors, but also founders are in a position to make really bold bets about the future and say, okay, we're going to be, you know, those who are going to challenge the current status quo and who are going to be the next leaders in this economy. Because the way that, you know, AI is evaluated as an impact, we would be probably speaking about a total transformation of the economy.
That's what I agree with. Basically, the mobile moment that I was referring to, you know, those companies wouldn't exist, like Uber, for instance, or Airbnb, if not for a mobile revolution that happened early on. So it kind of like changed the game. The infrastructure was already there. Maybe a couple of new players kind of like grew through the, you know, cloud-based businesses. But then there were a lot of startups that were able to utilize this infrastructure in a way to create like new businesses and new economies, as you mentioned. And I would see the same will happen with LLMs. So maybe now early on, it's much better to invest maybe in LLMs and in infrastructure in general that runs LLMs. But soon, and especially that's the moment where you should start your startup, is to build like around like an application ecosystem built on top of LLMs, basically.
Okay, but so obviously Central and Eastern Europe is not really a big exception of this global trend, because what we're discussing here is something that we see happening on a global scale. We see Europe lagging behind a bit. Now Central and Eastern Europe is in Europe. Is there good news for us somewhere? I mean, founders and investors are usually very optimistic people. Where do you see the potential for our region? Can we somehow compete, or should we give up at this point and say, okay, no, we need to focus on something else and invest our money somewhere else?
It is
in time.
a tricky question, because if
I
you
have
think
many of
about
them.
this in terms of AI revolution, I read somewhere a statistic that kind of 3% of H100 kind of NVIDIA servers, 3% has been purchased by by Europe as a whole, like 3% of the, yes. But we are the first ones to kind of introduce regulatory framework to kind of control AI. So kind of if you think about what lies in what is the set of priorities for Europe, it is clear, right? So kind of it's not the easiest ecosystem to navigate right now. And I also seen, for example, statistics that 1 in 6 startups in AI in Europe would consider moving outside just because of the regulatory framework that is being introduced. So it's not the easiest regulatory framework, first of all. Second of all, I guess kind of if we are talking about the fundamental models, in my humble opinion, the cards has been dealt. So kind of the winners are out there. Those are the big companies that put money and supported few of the startups with billions of dollars, and those players will provide the platforms or infrastructure that will kind of drive largely the revolution. But obviously you need to build application layer on top. So there is a big chance for Europe to build up different AI applications.
Okay.
Use, for example, the infrastructure that is readily available and build up the global players, if you think about this. or basically go in a bit different direction, because AI is not only LLMs. When we talk about AI, there are so many different flavors, like CNNs, deep learning models, you name it. So there is so many applications of AI. LLM is a very exciting part of the movement that basically build up a lot of that kind of moved a lot of interest for the investors. But right now, if you think about this, mostly it's a consumer-based product, right? Still enterprise, still kind of adoption of enterprises of LLMs is quite limited, right? There needs to be an adoption. So that's very exciting piece of technology. But and in terms of fundamental models, it will be very hard for Europe to compete. Obviously, we have a Mistral, so that's a competitor, Aleph Alpha. So we have some players in the space, but kind of there's just a few players that kind of already have a head start and resources that will be very hard to match.
But we even started creating Polish LLM models. So I would say I slightly disagree. So even in like LLM space, there's still a lot of room for startups and essentially, you know, like I would say more specialized units. So it's not something that will be dealt with through, you know, those kind of like big players. I would say there will be a trend toward like a smaller governed models that you can really, especially, you know, what EU is trying to do with AI Act, it kind of will require this kind of approach. So there is still probably some room here as well. But the application layer, yeah, we already established that this is the biggest opportunity for startup in general. Although I heard that at the same time we have also more AI regulations than AI startups that can work in the space right now, proper. Yeah,
I
in a
see
proper
that
way.
you want to talk about the AI Act. I still wanted to start with the good news and actually talk about the opportunities that we see in our region. Do we have the competence for the application layer, and in which sector? So we saw that, you know, health tech is something that has been upcoming. I think, and now transport is also is actually a field where we might actually have the business knowledge, the experience to do, I don't know, interesting applications. Where else do you see that?
So I will actually say that those two verticals will be the hardest for LLMs, because especially with AI Act, from what I understand, it's like there will be like a different like areas of risks, and I would say anything close to health tech and transportation will be like a high risk area. And definitely when you are a startup, if you try to approach like a high risks areas, you will require much more capital, like to be invested much more in the early stage to eventually be able to cope with regulations. So I would actually say those two verticals, maybe they were kind of like interesting for investors, but especially in the terms of like LLMs and eventually using, you know, AI doctors or, you know, anything that can be used in this way, I would say be super tricky to navigate the EU regulations. But there are definitely, you know, some verticals which will be much easier to work with. I would say like anything close to retail, or I don't know, like trainings, something which is maybe not like education, like kids education, but trainings for, you know, like
grown-ups
skills, for grown-ups, for instance. If you want to learn something new with LLMs, you can do that. You can have like your personal tutor in a way. And I would say this is like a low risk area in general to introduce, right?
Okay. Karol, where do you see which verticals can we, in Central and Eastern Europe, I'm talking about the competencies that we have, that we could have a chance when it comes to building the application layer?
I guess any, basically. So kind of in terms of application layer, it depends. Kind of as mentioned, those big LLMs are being commoditized, right? So building upon the application layer is using the available resources, tapping into the available kind of data sets and using them for particular purpose. So kind of the data is the new oil. So anyone that has access to the superior data can kind of maybe not monopolize the market, but kind of have a pole position in building sizable presence in particular markets. So I would say that we need to remember that if we talk about LLMs, we are talking still about kind of the infrastructure, the basic layer that enables to build up different applications. I guess the mobile kind of example was a very good example. So it's a platform that you can build upon. So C has all of the tools and all of the talent that is required to succeed in any of the verticals. Obviously, LLMs are not perfect for any applications. I would love to see also kind of development of different AI models. LLMs are super exciting, but I would say that kind of different kinds of deep learning models could be even more interesting.
Yeah, I just want to add something.
Yeah,
You
please
also
go.
mentioned, and I remember now your part of your
Mhm.
first part of your question. Yeah, we actually have a huge, talent pool in general in terms of like software development. And I would say in this case, the Europe is very well positioned as long as we kind of like start incorporating, those new techniques and those new models. And this is something which we still haven't seen that much. So actually, we started working with enterprises, as you mentioned, the enterprise adoption. It already started, especially thanks to Microsoft. But there is a lot of, there is not enough basically expertise and knowledge out there yet. And, companies with skills and expertise to build on top of those LLMs and techniques around LLMs. And this is basically the game that started like a couple months ago. So people are still kind of like learning the way how to incorporate LLMs into larger systems, basically. But that's also why there is an opportunity. And given that we have a lot of software agencies in Europe in general that used to do software development for USA and Canada and so on, I would say we are still in a very good position as long as we are kind of like start learning the new ways of application development.
Mhm. I'm also thinking that in a way, because digital transformation in maybe our part of the world, when it comes to the enterprises, it was much slower. At least now we have the time to leapfrog a bit, because we kind of like missed a couple of rounds. So if we want to prepare for the future, that actually we still have the chance. Pretty sure that we would still need the support of the governments. Let's hope that we would have smart people there who understand the opportunity that is here for our region. But okay, you spoke about the regulation. It's obviously a big topic. The AI Act. When was it published? It was just before a couple of weeks ago, right? My time schedule is a bit blurred in the past couple of weeks. Isn't that innovation as well, to be the first to write the regulation when it comes to AI?
No.
And how is it stifling innovation at this point? So you looked at it, I'm pretty sure. It was, I think, still a very great attempt. The industry was pretty much consulted. But in what way do you see stifling innovation in Europe at this point?
So in our case, specifically for our startup, I would say we are kind of like quite compliant with AI Act, at least in the basic layer, because the most important aspect of AI Act is basically making sure that the human will know that they are talking to AI rather than the chatbot in a way, well, to the human. So they kind of like differentiate between human and a bot, and they can make like an informed decision whether they want to continue talking with a chatbot or a human. And I would say all the existing tools, which are kind of like already incorporating like voice bots, chatbots, and so on, they will have to adapt. And basically, in our case, it's kind of like an opportunity, because if we produce like virtual beings, which already shows not as humans, but basically as something like which is digital, which is at the obvious layer already kind of like AI Act compliant at the basic layer. But there are obviously, another layers of AI Act related to manipulation of, psychological, neurolinguistic techniques and so on. So this is something that will be really hard to navigate for startups, especially. And, if you don't have enough money, then obviously it's like something which obstructs growth of your business, and especially early stage startups will have a really hard times doing that.
But I think even in the web, so the 2.0 boom, the problem weren't the startups using unethical techniques. It was the oligopoly, to put it like this. It was the people who are holding big chunks of the market, who were so big that they could actually do whatever they wanted. So now I'm actually asking myself, well, maybe it's not so bad to think, how are we going to prevent this kind of situation in the next transformation that we're going to go through? I don't know. Karol, you can comment on whatever you want when it comes to the AI.
Yeah, I guess that there is a general purpose AI
Mhm.
kind of a principle that is supposed to be applied for the big players.
Yeah.
but apparently it is applicable also for quite a few smaller players. I would say that, as usual, the big players will be able to get their way around it, and they are very in favor of the regulation because it's putting the moats around their kind of a competitive advantage. It prevents other players to follow the footstep because they have the resources, the lobbying power, the lawyers to kind of to adapt, to accommodate those changes, while it is not that applicable for vast majority of the startups. I guess the research that I have mentioned previously, that 1 out of 6 startups would kind of consider leaving EU. For example, the high category that you have mentioned, like high risk category, like out of 100 AI startups, 33% to 50% of the startups claim that they might fall into this high risk category, versus a European Commission assumption that it should be up to 15%, up to 10-15%. So kind of if you ask the regulator to kind of build up the regulation around very fast moving technological wave, it's always prone to errors. It's always subject of interpretation. Those are always quite broad definitions, and it always stifles the innovation. The compliance cost is up to even 300,000 euro to build up all of the transparency that is expected, to provide all of the information regarding the data sets that you have, to provide traceability that is not always that obvious. So I would say it will provide, it will be a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of nerves. It will be detrimental to the sentiment of the investors because it's just additional risk factor. And the startups will move outside of the EU, and US AI startups won't enter EU because it always apparently is applicable for the entities that are outside of EU but just operate in EU. So kind of I'm always getting nervous when a regulator tries to do something good for a technological ecosystem.
Well, they probably want to do it for the citizens. And
I'm
yeah.
not telling that the intentions are bad, but I'm pretty sure that result will be really stifled innovation. And exactly that's the case.
I'm pretty sure that at some point regulations also in other parts of the world will follow, just like we saw with the GDPR. We had the similar confusion, and then we needed to wait and see how it is going to be applied. And I think we're going to go through the same process again. We're going to see, okay, who are going to be the punished ones, the scapegoats. At the same time, I'm asking myself, maybe a clear framework will give us also the opportunity to assess risk easier. I don't know, from an investment perspective. Because if you're still knowing that there's going to be a regulation at some point, and you build like a whole business model which is in compliant with that, and I don't know, maybe clarity is always also good for the market, just like we saw in the recession. I mean, there was a recession, and at some point,
I'm afraid that this kind of regulatory kind of framework doesn't bring that much of a clarity.
Yeah.
As always, there's a lot of shades of gray in it. There is a lot of interpretation. Regulator is ill-equipped to review the technology and to put a stamp of approval on it. And I believe that investors are well equipped to kind of, and they have fiduciary duty towards their LPs to kind of assess the risk. And that's what we do all our lives. So I guess that help in this regards of the regulator is not needed.
in this sense, what would be a better collaboration when it comes to this regulation? I mean, are we speaking now as a possible solution that we have no regulation, we just leave it open and we let players be free, sandbox, play around, do stuff with citizens? I don't know, like the journalist in me is a bit opposing to this kind of idea, but what are you suggesting? What would have been like a better approach here?
So I would say this is definitely needed from both sides, right? Because from the society perspective, AI Act is a good thing, more or less, right?
Mm.
Introducing new thing in steps. From the business perspective, it's totally the opposite, right? So the more steps you have to take and the more compliance you need to do to have along the road, the more money you need to have early on where you don't have any money because you need to build your business. So it's kind of like a trap, right, for a startup. So unless, and I think Europe try to balance that with grants, we still have those. But I'm not sure if like it still executes well, meaning it's really hard to obtain a grant. It takes a lot of time. So before, I don't know what's the average time right now, but if it's like similar to what we used to have like with this like early Eastern European funds, which was like around 12 months, today 12 months means there will be another like 4 LLMs generations in between. So before you actually kind of like start working on your startup, you will have to kind of like reinvent the product you are building, more or less. So it's like, and obviously the grants doesn't work the way. So the thing you want to build, you have to already, you know, establish the whole business plan before that starts, right? So it just doesn't work. So it had to be reinvented in a way so there is a easy and fast access to this kind of like grant money and the amount of money you need to raise, because with every kind of like technological, heavily like deep tech technological thing, the capital needed to actually build the thing is probably like, I don't know, 5 times or 10 times more than if you are just building a SaaS platform, for instance.
So what you're saying, okay, it's good to have regulation, but then you need to increase the funding so that we can cope
Because
with
there are always, you know,
economies. Okay,
personal perspective.
It's an
Yeah, it's a good thing.
it's an interesting
Startup,
solution.
yeah.
At the same time, I'm pretty sure that Karol is very
That-
aware of how the funding ecosystem in Europe is working. Actually, the EU is the biggest investor when it comes to deep tech and all these defensible technologies. So, do we need even more funding than now?
So maybe before I will
Yeah,
just
go.
reflect on the
Yeah,
regulatory
please.
perspective. We need to remember about one thing. For the most critical verticals, the verticals that really require oversight, there is a set of regulations already. For kind of for health tech, you have FDA approvals. For kind of for aviation, you have FAA. For automotive industry, you have a set of regulations. So in terms of those critical parts of that kind of where the safety is utmost important, you have already set of regulations that kind of cover all of it. So kind of if we would be talking about additional regulations to make sure that AI is under some sort of control, I guess the strategy of small steps could be introduced
Mhm.
and check what works, what not, basically. So kind of a small, very high level regulatory kind of a framework that covers most critical applications, then kind of analysis. How does it impact the innovation ecosystem? Does it work? Is it overall too much of a burden? Does it stifle innovation?
Mhm.
Does it work? So that's how I would approach it. In terms of kind of European funding ecosystem, indeed, if you think about it, EIF, European Investment Fund, is the biggest LP for
Yes.
venture funds across Europe. We are beneficiary of EIF as well. There are multiple kind of a public money pockets
Mhm.
that work across Europe. Like EIC invested like 1.2 billion just last year into the startup ecosystem.
And I think they have actually increased, isn't it? They are
that's
increasing
just
now the budget.
investment amount.
Yes.
Yeah, so they back like 100 companies, 1.2 billion. So kind of a there is NATO Innovation Fund that is also our
Also,
LP,
yes.
right? So kind of also focusing on those strategic assets across Europe. So there are multiple kind of programs like Sprint in Germany and many others. So there is a very active public players that are supporting the innovation ecosystem. I'm not sure if more is needed, to be very frank. But
Maybe
at some
yeah.
point, it basically impacts the private capital. It's kind of shifting the market. So I would say that there is a lot of public money available in forms of the grants, in form of the support for VCs. And it seems that kind of it does a lot of good. Don't get me wrong, because kind of thanks to that one, the DeepTech ecosystem is growing, it's thriving. There is a momentum. There is a growing number of VC funds across the Europe that are deploying the capital into most exciting opportunities. But I would be careful with growing at any cost, with simply putting just money into the ecosystem, because not always just money solves the problems.
Well, maybe we should buy stocks in NVIDIA before that, before we put more money into the venture capital ecosystem. At
That's
least
an
we
idea.
can have like a share in that. If we can't have an NVIDIA in Europe, anyway.
I would bet
Yeah.
on some underdogs because Nvidia is currently the valuation is growing and so on. But I would say we were experimenting with different models, and basically OpenAI and Azure OpenAI kind of like slowed down because there has not enough capacity, right? So there is a lot of like demand now, but they have a limited amount of servers, and if they even buy more, that it will take time before they kind of like start using those. But at the same time, we started testing AWS, for instance. So all those like open source models now you can launch it on AWS, and I would say they are super responsive. So this would be my underdog in terms of like existing cloud providers, which didn't were at the forefront of this kind of like LLMs race, but eventually will kind of like follow with the infrastructure that will be used in the next couple of years. So just a small remark.
Speaking of infrastructure, and that would be probably my last question, and then I'm going to open up also for the panel to the audience, in case you want to bring an aspect that I haven't when I was moderating the discussion. I stumbled upon an interesting article which commented the infrastructure that the whole AI transformation is going to need in terms of electricity and energy. Now, we are still speaking about the big threat, which is climate change. We still haven't solved it. We say that AI can help us solve it as well, but obviously we're just at this point that just really enjoying talking to ChatGPT instead of writing with it. So the big promise, I don't know if it's going to arrive. I don't know if it's going to be invested also. The money is going to be invested in this direction. No idea. But are we ready in terms of energy transition to come to this transition when it comes to AI? Can we afford that? Especially in Europe, where, just a year ago we had the big discussion that we would be cold in the winter.
Absolutely not yet.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of innovation is going into that direction. So kind of a novel energy kind of technologies are popping up one after another. So hopefully we will get there. But are we ready right now? No, absolutely not. I guess that kind of the constraints are kind of putting pressure on the global energy grids started already with a blockchain.
Yes.
And right now it was basically kind of exacerbated by LLMs. So it's quite natural that the new emerging technologies will need more and more energy. So kind of that's how it worked, in the past 100 years. So kind of nothing nihil novi here, and we need to basically solve it out. And there are small fusion reactors. There are different ideas, right? Battery management technologies, you name it. Novel materials discovery. So kind of there is a lot of ideas. Hopefully, so some of them will materialize and will change the energy landscape globally. But right now, we are not quite there yet.
And I will also probably add to this that technology develops, and basically now we already see like LLM models that you can launch on your own laptop, like Google Gemini. It's something they already have like a version which runs on a mobile phone. So this is not something that necessarily will kind of like increase a GPU and CPU consumptions like tenfold or anything like that in the next couple of years. I would say the models will, this will happen at the same time, right? So we'll need more and more this kind of like models, but at the same time they will become smaller, more efficient, and so on. So I wouldn't say that there is like a upcoming crisis due to LLMs revolutions immediately, at least not yet.
It's evolution. Each new application will be more compute hungry. That's how it simply works. The same happens with the computing power, right? The law, the Moore's law kind of has driven the innovation revolution for the past decades or so. Also kind of running out of steam, but there are new semiconductor designs that are about to kind of once again enable this new generation of applications. So it's kind of that's the direction that kind of set up decades ago, and it will continue. So there will be new architectures, there will be new solutions that will kind of address this kind of a problem. So innovation happens in those sectors as well.
And where is currently Europe in comparison to, let's say, the US and Asia, China, in the terms of climate tech? Yeah.
In terms of energy,
Energy
we are
transition,
quite well positioned, especially Nordics. They are doing quite well. In terms of semiconductors, also we can see quite a few innovation. Myself, my last 2 deals were in the semiconductor space, so kind of also you can see quite a few really interesting approaches that will kind of enable to continue this trajectory.
Thank you. I liked also the note when you said it's not a revolution, it's actually an evolution. We should be probably a bit more realistic. That not going to happen that fast, and it's not going to happen at the same pace everywhere in the world. So probably we will still see a step-by-step progress and tendencies like in many other things. We media sometimes tend to make everything a bit more sensational, especially American media. And it's gonna change so fast, and it's gonna be so amazing and so great. Yes, we like to keep you on your toes. Is there a question that you would like to ask to our panelists, or maybe you can, I don't know, like throw on an aspect that we haven't discussed, share an opinion? Can you help me with the mic? We're not that many, but still, I'm not sure what's the acoustic in the room.
Okay, I think it works. Okay, so this is a follow-up on the too much regulation, too little regulation, and also the energy. We had quite a success, I think, when we got quite strict with the energy requirement in terms of ADD. So the fridges and so on, they use less energy than they used to, partially because it's competitive to sell something that uses less energy, but also partially because the regulation just say they have to. So I was wondering if there is any potential or any pressure in Europe to regulate the consumption by AI and so on of energy in those terms. Because from my point of view, what happens right now is a little bit ridiculous in terms of strengthening the models simply by trying to feed it ridiculous amounts of data and so on. So what I would probably do if I was them, I would try to divide the models into smaller fixed models and then possibly try to combine them into something more complicated. So I was just wondering if the EU is in a position and there is a will or something like that to sort of try to informs a change in the direction of the AI progress by trying to limit the resources needed, and if that could even work.
So I'm not sure about the regulations, but actually what started happening is actually people started building smaller and smaller models. So what currently is happening, like with Mistral and so on, this kind of like models, people are trying to build with a limited data set, something that can kind of like behave in a similar way to ChatGPT. And we already seen some great results from those kind of like, models that you can actually run on your own laptop. So I'm not sure if the regulation is needed by itself, because the business will regulate it probably, because the more CPU and GPU will need to run a powerful model to get the task done, then you will use it basically to save a bit of money, right? To save costs. So
I would say that regulation in that regards, I guess, it's close to impossible, to be very frank. Kind of, it's not enforceable. So you can introduce it, but you cannot enforce it largely. I believe that kind of the incentive to limit the size of the models are basically costs associated. So the cost of the servers, cost of the energy, which is growing. So I would say that's the I guess, limiting factor for those companies to not use all of the resources to pay for energy in the servers. And obviously, there are emerging applications that will require more lean models. And indeed, we will go into that direction. But anyhow, Europe is not leading in terms of this energy consumption and server purchases. I guess over-regulating us while US and China are kind of at the top of the list, and we are way behind. It is not the way to go.
But perhaps the way to go would be to prioritize the funding and the grants, which are a big part of the funding in Europe, some windows. I was just thinking along those lines, because if Europe has the problem with access to data, because we simply don't have big companies with the type of data needed, then smaller models may be a way to go for us.
That might be the case, but also smaller models means that in many cases those are the less parameters, right? So they need also quite a lot of data. There is estimation that we will run out of textual data by 2026. So kind of we are running out of internet, so to speak. So that is the problem. There is different ideas how to address it with more, for example, synthetic data. But I would say that more flexible lean models that are more kind of more focused on a niche or subsector or sector of the knowledge, that's the way we will end up with. Large language models is a enormous overkill. That kind of that is fantastic research. But if you think about this, you're trying to build up the general knowledge repository. That basically, and the only thing that you can compare it is a search engine. So that's the search engine on steroids, right?
But also to add on top of that, it's like NVIDIA recently, they actually introduced this NEM concept, so smaller models that like you can actually combine together to create like a system from them. So yeah, the small models by itself maybe not be like a ultimate solution to solve everything, but if we create like a network of agents with a smaller models that then
There were like 7 of models, if I remember correctly, combined within the concept, right?
mean like an NVIDIA NIMs?
No, sorry, it was llamas. Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about like a NIMS, and they have this kind of like approach, NVIDIA by itself, that they want to build like a smaller specialized models, but then they will create like a framework where you can combine them together depending on your use case and your
I
needs.
think this is
basically.
not solved yet, like the agent to agent communication. It's still something that we need
Yeah.
to work on. And it's going to be also very interesting when you have like agents and then you have the humans and then they need to kind of like work in a same system. That's going to be also an interesting, and that's a question for you guys.
Yeah, that's what I was actually saying,
Yeah.
thinking about. Like,
Yeah.
this is the biggest opportunity, and especially not only because of the AI Act. In terms of AI Act, this is necessary to kind of like introduce human into the loop, right?
Yeah.
Anything. But I would say in terms of like even business and enterprises, what we already observe from talking to customers, they will never, due to their, the traditional regulations, as you mentioned, they can't introduce like big models. Companies that tried, for instance, use ChatGPT, like there was like a Canadian Airlines that introduced ChatGPT, and it came up with some random policy of returns, I don't know, and the judge basically said, okay, you have to respect this because you made the decision to put chatbot on your website, so whatever the response chatbot produce, now you need to honor it and basically, I don't know, refund the customer or anything like that. So I would say those big enterprises, it doesn't matter where they are at the moment, it's like US or Canada, they will need more governance and control over those models. And this is where the opportunity is. So any startup that can solve a problem of eventually building those agent frameworks in a way that this is like explainable, governed, that you can control the outputs and perhaps introduce humans into the loop. This is probably the something that will create another couple of unicorns in the next couple of years.
Well, then I hope that we managed to give you a couple of ideas and inspiration. I'm sure that some of you are wannabe founders, even if you're not yet. And maybe AI is giving you the opportunity to try out something. That's our first event. Please, I don't know, whoever has the time, I know that we started a bit later, stay for a drink. Maybe you can talk about the topic also in a one-to-one conversation. Do you have time to stay a bit? Yeah,
Sorry,
you'll have to go. I know.
yeah.
Okay, but
I will stick around.
exactly. Let's stick around. Let's have a drink and move the conversation face to face.
And before we wrap up completely,
Yeah.
thanks everybody for participating. I just want to ask you to take a second to scan the QR code because we just launched the research, our AI innovation research for 2024 that you can access via the QR code. Don't do it now, okay? Because you will need like a good 10 minutes. So just keep a tab open on your phone. And in the next few days, we'll be very grateful if you can fill it in. And a weird wrap up, but I really need to do this. Although it's super exciting to talk about AI and innovation in deep tech and real tech and virtual beings, I'm going to share a very human moment with you. Back in the days when I was a student in Paris, my best friend was Polish and she taught me a tongue twister. And I never really had the chance to say it in front of Polish people. And since you're all here, Król, Karol, Kupil, Królowej, Karoline, Korale, Kolore, Korolowego. So thank you. See, I don't know if like one day this is gonna be so impressive, but I hope. But thank you again. Thank you for coming, and let's have a drink.